May it please the court, counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. What I want to do with you first is go over the charge so that when you go in there, you read the charge and you kind of know how to look around it. The first thing is, you've heard the defense on page 3, page 4, I think it is. Talk about bias and prejudice and sympathy. They want you to take emotion out of this whole case is what they want to do. But ladies and gentlemen, you are absolutely allowed to take into account the emotion, the demeanor of every single one of those witnesses. Michaela, she let her soul out to you all. She let it out and it flowed. You are absolutely, and I beg you to take that into account when you determine whether this defendant was insane at the time of the offense or not. Sarah and Jamie, they were broken about what they saw. They were emotional about what they saw. Take that into account. You're absolutely well within your rights. That's not what that means. That's all part of the case. It's all part of evidence. So certainly take into account the emotion, the stress, the anxiety, the memories, the nightmares that they'll have for the rest of their lives.
I object to that sort of statement of the law. They're only allowed to consider bias, sympathy, or prejudice from the witness stand in the context of determining whether or not that person is lying or telling the truth.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Thank you. On page 3, it talks about voluntary intoxication, and that it does not constitute a defense to the commission of a crime. And we know that the defendant was, by both experts and by the defendant's own admission, that he was high, that he felt good, that he was pissed about his life and the way his life was going. Well, ladies and gentlemen, he had no right to take it out on 2 little girls, 13-year-olds, walking home from school, complete strangers, laughing and joking about what little 13-year-old girls do. Never expecting that this murderer was lurking and watching from afar, locked and loaded, ready to go. They had no defense. Lorna Navazo used her binder, what she could. Look at the injuries, ladies and gentlemen. Look at the injuries. Her right arm is shredded. Her fingers of her left hand are shredded. It's because that's all she had to protect herself. It went through that binder. It went through that book. Then on page 4, it instructs you that defendants are presumed to be sane and that the state carries no burden to prove sanity. We've talked about it. We've talked about it with experts. That's not in dispute. Once we prove that murder, as I submit to you, Mr. Rasmussen conceded, we have proven our murder, and that Mr. Poole talked to you about so eloquently and so passionately about. The dispute's not whether the murder occurred or not. So once we prove the murder, the burden shifts to the defense. And then they have to prove that he was insane, the defendant was insane at the time of the offense. At the time of the offense. Not a year before when he was at UT Harris Hospital. Not a year after when he's talking to his expert. It was at the time of the offense. And they have a pretty high burden of proof. They have to prove that he didn't know that his actions were wrong. That he had a mental illness and he didn't appreciate the wrongfulness of his actions. And then at the back, you're going to have the verdict forms that everybody's talking about, and then you're going to have count 1, which is the murder. And the first one is if you believe the defendant committed the offense of murder. And I submit to you that's the verdict form that you're going to use. And you just have your presiding foreperson sign that. Behind it, you want to make sure you understand the next one. That's where you out and out find the defendant not guilty of the offense. He walks out of his courtroom if you sign the second verdict form. The third verdict form is not guilty by reason of insanity. And that's us to count 1. And then on the back of that, you're going to find the deadly weapon verdict. That's just whether a firearm was used. A firearm is per se a deadly weapon. So I submit to you there's no argument whether a deadly weapon was used. You heard from a Kendrick say that it was a firearm, it's a deadly weapon, but we have to have to make a finding as to that. And then you're going to go on, and that's the count dealing with Lauren Landavazo. Count 2 is the count regarding Michaela Smith. It's aggravated assault. You go through the same process. The first one is if you find the defendant guilty, which is what the state is requesting, you just find the defendant guilty of aggravated assault. You have the foreperson sign that document. The next one is also a not guilty, just flat out not guilty. He walks out of the courtroom today. And I submit to you that the defense has conceded that should not be the case. And then the third one is not guilty by reason of insanity for the aggravated assault. And finally, the last verdict form is another deadly weapon finding. And there's no contest on that if you just find that a deadly weapon was used. And that pretty much sums up the charge. Drug misuse is not a disease, it's a decision. And that's what we're talking about here today and what the last 2 weeks have been about. They've been about choices and decisions on the part of this defendant. It's like the decision to step out in front of a moving car. Would you call that not a disease? You call it an error in judgment. That's what he does, and he did, and will continue to do with regard to drugs. He told Dr. Price that if he gets out of jail, if he gets out of prison, what's the first thing he's going to do? He's going back to the drugs. Those are conscious decisions on his part. He's been without them for 2 years, but yet he craves them. He wants them, and that's what he'll do, and that's what he was doing on the day that he committed murder and aggravated assault of those two 13-year-olds. Let's talk about before. Right before September 2nd of 2016, before he murdered and shot two 13-year-olds, he formed a plan. You know right from wrong when you're forming a plan ahead of time. He watched the victim, Lauren Landavazo, for a year. She was in 7th grade at that time. She would walk home with her boyfriend who was 8th grade at that time. From junior high. In his statement, he acknowledges he knows she's walking home from middle school. Despite what he told the experts, he couldn't bring himself to say, yeah, I knew she was 13 years old. I knew she was that young. He wants to say 16 because it sounds better. There he goes with his lying and manipulation where he tells you in that statement he's good at it. Waited until his parents were out of town to get the loaded semi-automatic rifle from their apartment. He waited. He had a key to their apartment. He knew they were going to Ruidosa, no chance of coming back to that apartment. This is the really sick and insidious part, is he chose a specific caliber of rifle to use. The .22 doesn't cause as much damage as a .223. The .223 would have mutilated her. He didn't want that. Preparation. What did he do? He left his parents a note for when he was caught and arrested. That's in preparation, ladies and gentlemen. He knows what he's about to do. He knows what he's doing is wrong. So he gets ready to tell his mom, who he's so close to, who gives him the drug money, why he did what he did. That's preparation. That's knowing right from wrong right there. He placed the rifle in a bag, threw clothes over the rifle to make it appear as it was a baseball bat. So people would think that he's going to baseball practice. Who does that? That's thinking beforehand. That's not an irrational thought. That's, okay, what are people going to think if they see me when I leave this apartment with this thing sticking out? He's not carrying the rifle out of the apartment, and walking along. Everybody's going to report it if they see that. And I'm telling you all of these things, and I've listed them because you can't take it back into the jury room. So that's why this is probably the third time that I've mentioned this series of actions on the part of the defendant, so you can talk amongst yourselves about the wrongfulness of his actions and his knowledge. He racked the weapon, or because the expert didn't know, it's basically where you're cocking the gun, for another lack of a better term. So he racks the weapon before he leaves the apartment, so he's ready to commit murder. He wants to do it fast so he can get away. He does that so there's no mistakes. He's ready to go. Locked and loaded, ready to be a sophisticated assassin. How many times did he say he was a sophisticated assassin? What do assassins do? They kill people. That's against the law. You can't kill people. He knew his conduct was wrong. He put there should be a safety. I apologize for my quick typing here, but put the weapon on safety so as not to hurt himself. There was nobody else in the apartment. Heck, he didn't want to hurt himself. He knew that that gun went off and he might hurt himself, so got to put it on safety. How much forethought does that take when you're getting the weapon ready? Heck, I probably wouldn't even know to put it on safety, and I've been around guns all my life. He watched from inside the apartment. It's not like he was sitting outside with a rifle just waiting for them to walk by and he can unleash on them. He was inside the apartment waiting for school to get let out, like he'd watched her so many times before. Watches her and her friends walk by. When they walk by and he's enraged because of the color of the skin of her friends that she's walking with, he runs outside, he places the bag and the weapon carefully in the vehicle. He describes that in his statement that you heard yesterday, so that the butt of the gun is up. So all he has to do is reach over and point it out the window, and he's ready to go, because it's speed at which he wants to commit this offense. Why? Because he doesn't want to get caught. Then you have during. He used a vehicle. It's mobile. You can get away. You know, if you shoot somebody just on the street and you're walking there, you can run, but there are going to be people that are chasing right behind you trying to catch you because you know what you did is wrong. People are going to catch you because they know what you did is wrong. So he uses a vehicle. Remember what he said? Oh, I used I was hoping, it's Friday night, and so it's football in Texas, and so there's pep rallies, there's a lot of stuff going on, so it's that confusion he was hoping to cause so that he'd get away with it. He stopped at the end of the alleyway, so there's nowhere for the victim to run. She was his prey, ladies and gentlemen. He didn't want her to get away. She was at that edge. He pulls up. She has nowhere to go. She wasn't going to get away from him, no matter how fast she ran, no matter how fast she tried. He remembers every detail, even though, and this is the really sick, insidious part. I keep saying that. I can't get past it because it's evil. Every detail he remembered, he savored, even though the shooting only lasted a matter of seconds. Think about it. If I shot someone, heck, I couldn't tell you who was beside one person or another. He can tell you there were 3 girls. One 13-year-old girl runs down the alley immediately. One stands her ground by her friend. And the other one's there, the one that he wants, and he shoots her. And I don't know whether Michaela got the first shot. I don't know if Lauren did. All I know is they both got shot. And they should never have gotten shot. They were 2 13-year-olds. So in his statement, he claims he shoots Lauren first. And then he sees Michaela not leaving her friend's side. So remember, he goes, pop, 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 and then he puts a couple in her friend, pop, pop, and then he goes back to pop, 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 pop. I mean, did you see how giddy he was? He was reliving that, ladies and gentlemen. You'd think that it'd be a nightmare for him. Those are his few seconds. So he shoots Lauren, he shoots Michaela, and what I dreaded for 2 years I had to do yesterday, that was introduce that statement, because the Landavazos had to hear how their daughter died. They had to hear that she didn't die instantly, because they've lived off of that for the past 2 years, that she died quickly. So he hears Lauren scream, and he goes back to Lauren and knows that I got to stop the screaming because he doesn't like that. It's not that Lauren was in pain. Remember, did you see him in his video? He didn't like it. He didn't like the way it made him feel. So he had to quit it. So he aimed for her head, and remember, he even said he saw the tuft of her hair. It's corroborated by the evidence, by the pathologist. That was the kill shot. And he knew she was dead, and she went down. He remembers those seconds. It couldn't have been more than 8 seconds. And he remembers every detail. I submit to you, it's video games. Because in those video games that you play constantly, you're always looking for these other enemies coming out from different directions. So he had the peripheral vision that normal people don't. And I could talk about aim at the body and not the head initially because he didn't want to mutilate her. Notice that her black friend wouldn't leave the victim's side, so he shot her so she'd run off. Notice the race of all 3 girls. And this is in a matter of seconds. He emptied the clip until it clicked. Remember, he made the clicking sound in his statement to detectives. And thank God those detectives were persistent. Thank God Detective Alan Killingsworth persisted. Because for 45 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, he denied it and he came up with every excuse in the world. He did. If only he had a few more bullets, he would have killed Michaela Smith. Why? Because she was a witness. What do you care about witnesses if you don't know what you're doing is wrong? And then after. And this is really telling. Flight. He left the scene immediately onto one of the busiest roads in our town, in Wichita Falls. Southwest Parkway, you've heard the testimony, is one of our busiest streets. It's when schools are letting out. Not only a junior high, but a high school, elementary schools, all throughout our town, they're letting out. There are pep rallies going on because it's Football Friday. Parents are picking up their children. Children are walking home. No one is thinking anybody's going to get shot in this town. He tells you he hoped there would be confusion. Why would you hope there's confusion unless you knew what you were doing was wrong? If you thought you were going to be right there and get caught in broad daylight, as the defense wants you to think. You took the back roads. Who takes the back roads if you don't know what you're doing is wrong? Went to a small town at least an hour away. This is key, ladies and gentlemen. He had to distance himself from the murder weapon. He threw it into a vacant field with long grass without stopping. He looked back to make sure he couldn't see the weapon. You know what you're doing is wrong if you toss it. He didn't even stop. He didn't even stop his vehicle. Remember, he said he threw it out and was getting the heck out of there, and then he lit up a joint. You just killed, and you know you killed the 13-year-old, and you know you've shot another one, you don't know whether she's dead or not, and you light up a freaking joint? Is that mental illness? No. That's I've just done what I wanted to do, and I vented. Remember, he said, I finally got to vent because he's mad at women. His job was completed. And so now he's just going to stroll on to own it. And the defense makes a big deal of, oh, well, he didn't wipe the weapon down. There's some grass left on it. Remember, he was putting it back into his parents' safe. He'd been convinced that he wasn't going to get caught. So what does he care? If you don't know what you're doing is wrong, why do you have a scanner app? Why do you have it in your vehicle after you've just committed murder and aggravated assault, shooting 2 13-year-olds? A scanner app. I don't even have one on my phone. And he's listening to the police, listening to the chatter. And you'll see in the FBI report, he acts like he doesn't know the details of the shooting when his mother, who's in Ruidoso, texts him a few hours later about the shooting, because she knows her son's capable of that. Why else would you text your son about some shooting in Wichita Falls when you're on vacation in Ruidoso? She knew what he was capable of. She enabled him. She gave him money for his drugs. He checked social media, and it's in the record. The defense expert didn't bother to look at his cell phone, which is pretty telling, before, during, and after the offense. It shows you, he's not in there talking about the devil. He's not in there talking about delusions. He's texting people, calling people, talking to his mother. I urge you to look at those. He's checking social media and the news media. Text homepage is what he mentions in his statement. And I'm sure he was watching Channel 6-2, which is our other station, and Times Record News, our local newspaper. Anyway, he's checking it constantly for the details of the shooting that whole weekend, from that Friday through that Sunday before he gets caught. He knows what he's doing is wrong. And talk about evil, he looks on Facebook after he's killed this little girl. He looks on Facebook to look at her Facebook profile to find out her name and her boyfriend's name. He looks at his profile. He wants to know her boyfriend's name, that punk. Realized the police were looking at the wrong suspect vehicle, so he came back to town. He was giddy. Remember, it was kind of like a blessing when the black truck all of a sudden came up. Man, I thought I was free and clear. So he could go and do whatever he wanted to. He could actually even come back to town. When he comes back to town, what does he do? He's not going to get caught. People are looking for this black truck. There's chaos going on. Man, I'm a stranger. They don't know who I am. I'm the only one that knows that I shot them. He goes and destroys that note because he doesn't want his parents to find out what he's done. Doesn't want his mom to find out what he's done. Let's go back to our normal, regular life and my drug using. This is how determined he was. He returns for that weapon not once but twice. Remember, he throws it out in that vacant field. He doesn't know. He saw it generally where it goes. So he goes back that morning. He says he didn't try that hard. So he goes back later when it's cooler and goes and searches for that weapon, the murder weapon, until he finds it. Remember, he's hot and he's sweaty, but he's determined to find it, and then he sees the black butt of the gun. So he tosses it because he wants to distance himself from it, because he doesn't want to be caught with it, because he knows that he's wrong. And then he goes back and gets it when he realizes he's not caught, because he doesn't want to get caught. So he's going to try to put it back in his parents' apartment before they come home. He didn't want them to know. He thought they might turn him. I submit to you they probably wouldn't have. He takes the weapon out of the vehicle, wraps it in a blanket. He doesn't know right from wrong, right? And then he places it under his arm. Do you remember how she said that he was walking like this? Do you remember, to conceal it? And he's looking around and he's in a hurried fashion. Who does that but a guilty man? And thank God for her. You see something, you say something. And she and her husband, you heard, debated it for a while whether she should call because she didn't want to get anybody in trouble. Had it been 20 seconds earlier or 20 seconds later, we might not be here right now in the presence of a murderer. He may never have been caught. Thank God for that woman. She's a hero. After leaving the apartment, you heard the 911 call. You heard the my goodness, and there's a picture right here where she, of all pens to grab, she grabs a purple ink pen and writes the tag number on her hand. Ladies and gentlemen, who does that? I couldn't have remembered probably 3 of the digits, and she had all 6. And then went to Google and to see what type of vehicle it was to help the police as much as she could. And let's not forget, when she first saw the defendant, what was he passing? The memorial. And what does a murderer always do? Returns to the scene of the crime. So after leaving the apartment, he's pulled over by an officer, and he's clenching the steering wheel so hard, his knuckles are white. It's because you know you've done something wrong, and you're caught. During the traffic stop, which you heard, He followed every direction and every question that the officer had. Did he say, oh my gosh, I'm hallucinating, the devil, anything like that? Did you hear any of that? He sounded like a normal person. He wasn't suffering delusions. This is less than 48 hours after the murder and aggravated assault. Officer Gordon did a great job. And Officer Robeson, to stop him, to have the wherewithal to think about reasonable suspicion, that's not easy, ladies and gentlemen. That's not easy. Because he didn't commit a traffic stop. So he had to articulate reasonable suspicion. And I submit to you, he prayed to Jesus. What's the first thing that you do when you get into trouble or you're on hard times? I know what I do. You pray. You pray to God, you pray to Jesus to help you. To help you out of this mess, out of this problem, out of this mistake, whatever you've done, you pray to Jesus. And that supposed satanical, delusional person over there, first thing he did was pray to Jesus. Not the devil, not the occult, not 6 + 9 = 8, not red plus blue equals purple. He prayed to Jesus. He lied to officers for 45 minutes without once mentioning a single delusion or a single reference to the devil. You heard it. And the amazing thing to me is that if it had been me, and I had an officer that said, yeah, you know, we found did you go, were you carrying anything? Yeah, I was carrying a comforter. Oh, were you carrying anything else? Did you notice how he put his hands? Because he knew he was kind of sticking it under his elbow, trying to make it make sense, right? But when he was busted about not washing the comforter, he said, oh, I had to take the drugs and go. We take the money and go. I just want to get out of there. So he even was quick about his lies. And then the biggest lie in the whole thing was when the officer mentions the stent shell casing that they found in the vehicle. What does he say? Oh yeah, that's when I went a year ago with my buddy, and we were out in the country and we were shooting coyotes from, and that guy's name's Eric, shooting coyotes out in the country. And then, well, did you shoot it? Well, now that I think about it, no, I wasn't shooting, it was him. Oh, really? Well, what type of weapon was it? A .22. How fast was that? Watch it. It's unbelievable. I couldn't have done it. And that would be me trying to think of a lie. It's so natural to him because he's a manipulator. He's a liar. He's an exaggerator. Everything Dr. Price told you is true. And that's before Dr. Price ever got to interview the defendant. Evil. Evil, ladies and gentlemen. He implicated not one innocent person, but two. He implicated his stepbrother to try to throw the detectives off the scent. Oh, well, you know, my stepbrother has long, shaggy, brown hair. You know, oh, he could have had keys to my stepdad's black truck. Oh, he was supposed to come and get a gun, is what my mom told me. Knowing that he had committed the offense. He's trying to throw even his own stepbrother under the bus. And then when that wasn't enough, later on, oh, yeah. There's this guy named Morlon, whatever. He dates my ex-girlfriend. He's been following me around. Oh, he drives a black truck with chrome, this and that, and tries to make it match the suspect vehicle to throw the detectives off. Knowing Morlon did not commit the offense, he did. He's evil. He told the detectives that you know you've done something bad when you're talking to the police. He knows his actions are wrong. He uses the term over and over again, caught. You don't use the term caught unless you know what you're doing is wrong. You don't use the term murder or the murder unless you know it's an offense. If it's an offense, it's illegal, you know what you did is wrong. Told the police he found himself playing it cool when he hadn't been caught. the word caught again. He even brought up the reward money amounts to officers. He knew it because he'd been checking that Facebook, he'd been checking that news constantly that whole weekend. And do you remember the defense expert? He wanted to argue with me about what constantly meant. Oh, he might have had to go to the bathroom. I mean, he was making excuses for the defendant, much like the defendant's mother. Excuses. Bought and paid for. Told officer he knew within the first 48 hours that that's crucial in a murder case. And he tells them, I almost made it. I almost made it 48 hours. Told the officer he was going to keep the murder a secret if he'd been caught. If he hadn't been caught. His little secret, no one knew, only him. And then he said to officers that people wouldn't even know they were in the presence of a killer. He was proud of that. Of a 13-year-old and hurting and shooting another 13-year-old. During the jail telephone call, he tells his mother and stepfather not once but twice, you heard it, that he did it. Remember his stepfather said, did you confess to it or did you do it? And he even makes the distinction, no, I did it. He asked him again, same question. He said, no, I did it. Have a good life, his mother says. During the jail telephone call, he and his mother, we heard this from Dr. Price, he and his mother discussed pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. Just 2 weeks after he's arrested, he's already plotting and planning what he's going to try to pull the wool over your eyes. 2 weeks after he murders a 13-year-old and shoots another one in the chest whose bullet is still there. He's telling you he's going to plead insanity. And what did he do? 2 years later, that's exactly what his defense team's arguing. Let's talk about the experts. And I'm almost done. Experts, we have Dr. Falls. Impressive where he went to medical school. Seems like a nice enough gentleman. He has zero experience. Zero. This is his first trial testimony regarding insanity. I submit to you they couldn't find an experienced forensic psychologist or psychiatrist to find that that defendant was insane.
Objection, Your Honor, that's a mistake of the evidence.
Overruled.
Again, I submit to you they couldn't find anybody with the credentials and the experience and the ability to testify that would say Kody Lott was insane at the time of the offense. And remember when I asked him, are you a defense witness? He said yes. And that was kind of interesting. I'd never had an expert say that before. I was just seeing what he'd say. He was a defense witness. He testified for the defense. He gave excuses for the defense and the defendant, Excuses, ladies and gentlemen. He's supposed to give an unbiased opinion based upon medical certainty. And you saw it. And he couldn't even answer one of my questions without wanting to explain everything. And I was just yes or no. And he couldn't even give me yes or no. That's all I asked. No experience. In charging $15,000 before you even took the stand? $15,000 for what you heard. And that's not considering the 2 days that he was here. Versus Dr. Price. Dr. Price has been doing this for 35 years. You all heard that. You heard what type of cases he testified in. He was fair to the defense, as fair as he was to the state. I retained him. I didn't tell him what opinion he should have. Had he told me that the defendant was insane at the time of the offense, I'd have to tell the defense. It was purely medical. He told you I didn't try to influence him. I was stuck with whatever he came up with. I was that confident in this case after looking at the facts of this case, that somebody with that experience of Dr. Price would see what I saw. And I'm just an untrained eye, that Dr. Paul said, to the untrained eye, you wouldn't know these things. And Dr. Price has been on some big cases. You heard him talk about Eddie Ralph, and that was Christopher Kyle case, an American sniper. He testified in that case. They could have picked any expert in the United States that they wanted to. And they thought that Dr. Randall Price was fair, experienced, honest, and professional, and that's why he testified in that case. And we brought him here so that you could hear his unbiased opinion. This is the most telling of it all. This is what it comes down to, ladies and gentlemen. In 35 years as a forensic psychologist, Dr. Randall Price has never seen a single case with more behavioral indicators that the defendant knew that his actions were wrong. 35 years. That man had, he told you about all the people that he's evaluated. He told you about all his opinions for the defense, for the state, for the judge. And this is what he comes up with. In all of those years, the defendant right over here had more behavioral indicators that he knew that his actions were wrong. More so than anybody else in the history of Dr. Price's professional forensic psychology in his history. And that would be Kody Lott, the man that sits before you. Ladies and gentlemen, I guess it's been over a week now. I stood before you. I told you what I was going to bring you. A little emotional back then, and I think you now see why I was emotional on that very first day in my opening statement. We've lived and breathed this case for 2 years. The Smiths, the Landavazos, good people. I told you that Lauren's parents, Vern and Bianca, and then Michaela Smith's parents, Rodney and Shamika Smith, those are the parents of the two 13-year-old girls that day. They've had the patience with me. It's been 2 years. And I've done everything that I could do. You have the detectives. You have the witnesses that were out on scene. They come and they took the stand and they did everything that they could do to bring you the truth. Everything. As hard as it was, you heard them crying and you heard the emotion. You heard Michaela take that stand when she didn't have to, but she wanted to. She wanted to be strong for her friend. She wanted to do right by her friend. And I submit to you that she did. You heard the detectives, Detective Alan Killingsworth, and then there was Charles Casillas, and there was Walt Vermillion. And Walt Vermillion, this whole case, he put together. He did a brilliant job in this case. This is not an easy case. You saw how much evidence there is in this case, and he managed to keep it organized. He worked hard. He worked nights. He worked nonstop. The patrol officers that were out on scene that pulled the car over, they tried to do their job. It's a joint team effort on the part of everybody, ladies and gentlemen. I tried to do my job. Ron Poole tried to do his job. He did a great job. It's an honor to try a case with Ron Poole. My investigators, my office, my support staff, we all cared about this case and we put our heart into it. And I told you that I was going to come before you and I was going to ask you one thing. Excuse me. That at the end of this case, on behalf, of the state of Texas, on behalf of the citizens of Wichita County that I represent, that I was going to ask you 12 jurors and 2 alternates to do your job with the authority that you're vested with. You took an oath to uphold the law, to do what's right. You Tarrant County citizens, Wichita County is counting on you. The state of Texas is counting on you to do the right thing because he did the wrong thing and he knew it. Thank you.